Okay, in this video we're going to take a look at a shortcut called the quadratic formula for finding the solutions to a quadratic equation. So let's start off with a quadratic equation in general form. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And let's use the method that we took a look at in the last video of solving by using completing the square essentially. So I did move this c value to the other side and factor out an a value, and then figure out what needs to go in here to complete the square, and that's half of this value, which is b over 2a, and then I have to square that, and I get b squared over 4a squared. And what I just added to that side was a times b squared over 4a squared, which these a's can cancel, is really b squared over 4a. And so if I add b squared over 4a to the left-hand side, I also have to add b squared over 4a to the right-hand side. And what I'm doing here is trying to solve for x using just the letter variables a, b, and c, and then create a formula that will allow us not to have to do this every single time, but find a little bit of a shortcut. So there is now a perfect square. It's x minus, plus b over 2a all squared. And on this side I have a couple of different numbers. It'd be nice if I could combine them together. So that's not too difficult to do. All I have to do is come up with a common denominator, and so that would be 4a, and so the top I'd have to multiply by 4a as well. So I get minus 4ac plus b squared, and on the bottom 4a. And I want to divide both sides by a. So I get x plus b over 2a squared is, if I divide this by a, that's the same as timesing by 1 over a. So that gives me minus 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. And I give myself a little bit more room to work here. I now take the square root, so I get x plus b over 2a, and on this side I take the square root of the numerator, so that's the square root of, and I'm just going to rewrite it into the other order, b squared minus 4ac, and I get the square root of the denominator, which is 2 and a, and don't forget that's plus or minus, and now I have to move this term over to the right hand side, so x is, when this term I subtract b over 2a on this side, and I subtract b over 2a on the other side, minus b over 2a plus or minus this big huge b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now since these have a common denominator where I can put those things together, so the denominator is 2a and the numerator is minus b plus or minus, and then b squared minus 4ac. And this equation here is a very famous equation for finding your x values if you know your a, your b, and your c values of a quadratic that's in general form. So let's see if we can use this to try a couple of examples. So let's try and solve this 3x squared minus 4x minus 5 is 0. So we've got two other tools that we could use. We could try and factor it. If we could try using the square root method, move the 5 over, which is essentially what this quadratic equation is doing for us as a general solution. Or we can use this quadratic equation and just memorize it, plus know how to find our a, our b, and our c values, and then we can basically write the answers are, x is, so negative of 4, negative of negative 4, which is 4, plus or minus, and then negative 4 gets squared, minus 4 times the a value of 3 times the c value of negative 5, all divided by 2 times the a value of 3. And so you might need a calculator or at least bedmass to slowly go through this. You get 4 plus or minus the square root of, that's 16, and this is 5 times 4 is 20, times 3 is 60, and 2 negatives is plus 60, all divided by 6, and that becomes 4 plus or minus 76, all divided by 6. This 76 can break down because 76 is the same as 2 times 38, and 38 is the same as 2 times 19, and so this becomes 4 plus or minus. If you think about these square roots like this, these 2's, one of them simplifies or escapes, and there's a leftover square root of 19, all divided by 6. And then these numbers here have a common factor, and if all 3 of them have a common factor, you can cancel that common factor out. So I'll do that, and I'll write dividing each by 2, 2 plus or minus the square root of 19, 1 times the square root of 19, all over 3. And this is the correct answer. We can use a graphing calculator and find the decimal places for it. You can plug those decimal places back in and see that your solution will equal to 0. In fact, it's a good idea this time to grab your graphing calculator and make sure that you can get the 2 decimal equivalences to what I've done here. And so what I mean by that is there's actually 2 x values. One is x equals 2 plus the square root of 19, all divided by 3, and the other solution to this is x equals 2 minus the square root of 19, all divided by 3. And so grab your calculator, pause the video, and make sure you can get the decimal places that I'll show you in a second. So you should have got 2.12, about 2.12, and negative 0.79 on your calculator. Check that you're punching things in properly, and then you can move on to another example. So here's the second one. If you're feeling confident with this, go ahead and pause the video and see if you can do this one. And then you can confirm your solution with the solution that I'll show you. But go ahead, pause the video now and try it out. For those who didn't want to pause the video, or for those who paused the video, welcome back. The x value is, so negative b, which is 3, plus or minus the b squared minus 4a and c, all over 2 times a. And so I get 3 plus or minus, this is 9, minus, and this is a big number, 8 to 160, all over 4, and 3 plus or minus, this is negative 151, all over 4. And if you try and punch this in on the calculator, you get a big problem right here. And that problem is the fact that we don't want to, and nor does our calculator, take the square root of a negative. And so there's actually no solutions to this. It's impossible to find any x value that if you put it in here and here, you would make this equal to 0. And so we just simply write no solutions. Now, it turns out that in our quadratic equation, this b plus or minus b squared, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, there's a very important part, which is this piece right in here, this b squared minus 4ac. It's so important it has its own name. It's called the discriminant. And if that discriminant is negative, if what you get inside the square root is less than 0, it's negative, there's a problem, and we get no solutions. If that discriminant is positive, like we had in the first example, then not a problem at all. If it's positive, then we get our 2 solutions, and off we go. And there is one other case. That discriminant could be exactly equal to 0. And if it equals to 0, there's just one solution. because you'll get your minus b plus or minus 0 over 2a, and this part won't produce two different numbers. You'll just get one number, minus b over 2a, as your x values. So just make sure that you know this formula so that you can utilize it whenever you want to find those x value solutions to a quadratic equation, because it is definitely the quickest way to do things, aside from factoring if you're really good at factoring. Okay, we'll see you in class.